Hello and welcome to our webinar on Data Fabric and the April release overview. I have with me Senior Product Manager Bojan, and he's going to go through the main topic of today. But before we get into that, I have a few things to talk about. So first of all, thank you for joining. When you're watching this, Google Chrome is the preferred browser, so other browsers might have some minor issues. You can customize your screen. At the bottom of the screen, there are buttons, widgets, where you can move things around and enlarge them if you want. If there are any technical issues, the screen freezes or there's a lag, pressing F5 or refreshing the screen usually helps with that. And if you have any issues or have questions during the webinar, you can use the Q&A widget to post your comments or questions. We have a few webinars coming up this summer. So in July, we'll have the introduction to EPM administration with OLAP modeling. And in August, we have the analytics widget with Burst and EPM. We'll be announcing those a couple of weeks before the actual webinars, but you can already put those in your calendar. And lastly, I just want to remind people about Infor TechX coming in October in Orlando, and it is a 2-day event meant for developers. There'll be presenters, challenges, demos, all kinds of interesting and fun stuff about obviously InfoOS and everything around that. So again, put that in your calendars too. And there is a link in the chat where you can access the site for this event. And with that, I'm going to give it over to Bojan. Before I do, this session is pre-recorded, but Bojan is here to answer your questions throughout the webinar. So if you want to ask anything, put it in the Q&A and we'll get to that. And we'll try to do all of those during this an hour or so. But with that, thank you, Bojan, for doing the presentation, and off you go.
Thank you, Rina. Hi, everyone. So today we'll cover some of the topics that were enhancement that we released with the April 2025 release cycle. The focus of today's presentation and demonstration will be on how to manage security profiles in Data Fabric, how to use the data ledger for reconciling streaming ingestion data. That's an enhancement we did in April, but it's pending adoption by the Infor ERP, so we'll explain a bit more what to expect going forward. And we'll also discuss how to use stream pipelines to stream data to SQL Server databases. Stream pipelines is an already existing feature. It's an additional service to the InfoOS licensing. However, with the April release, we included an enhancement to support delivering data to SQL Server-based services. With that, I'll start with the security profile management topic. Just to mention, there is the standard disclaimer, as some of the topics that we'll mention are planned adoptions, or if I mention anything that will be coming as part of the roadmap, that's under the standard disclaimer that things might change and the timelines might change as well. Okay, so let's start off with security profile management. I'll go over some slides to discuss the basics and the concepts, but the focus would be on the demonstrating live how this is done within the application. So just as a reminder, what's Data Fabric Security? It is a set of tools that allow to manage role-based access to the Data Fabric features and services, as well as managing access to the data. The access to the data is managed on an object level and property level, or also known as table level and column level data security. The Data Fabric Security feature is based on applying the permissions on the IFS security roles. So for every group of personas that you would like to manage within Data Fabric Security, you would create an IFS security role, and then you would use that IFS security role to define the permissions within Data Fabric Security. This is not a new subject. It's been released for some time now. In October 2024, we enhanced it with the Data Fabric data security permissions, and now we're just discussing the enhancements to export and import security profiles. It's important to understand some of the core concepts here, that a user within Infor can have multiple IFS security roles assigned to them, and you can assign different kind of permissions and data security permissions on these roles. So the combination of all the roles that are assigned to a user will give a union of all the permissions that they can access in terms of the features as well as data. So what was the problem after releasing data security is that there is no easy way of migrating or backing up the security profile settings. Every time you need to set up something, you would do that manually by applying all the configurations once more. So obviously that is a challenge when you have a lot of profiles to manage, and as well as different environments where you would like these profiles to be migrated to. So we've started off by enhancing data security to allow exporting and importing those security profiles. And this provides us the basis for us to continue further enhancing the content management capabilities in data security in the future, providing also APIs as well configuration management for data fabric security. This should generally improve your process of how you manage security profiles, reducing also potential and user errors when having to recreate those same settings across different environments, and in general saving you a lot of time by having this exported content instead of recreating it all the time. So what's new in the overall process in managing data fabric security is that now the administrators can export and import through the UI. Also, you can edit these JSONs that you export. So if you want to change them and include other security roles within the exported file, or you want to change some of the settings for the security roles, you can do that by editing the JSON file as well. When you import it, we have certain validations to ensure everything is in order. But generally, when you export something, you can just follow that as a template and adjust it or create new profiles based on that. We've also renamed a label in the UI. So previously, you would see the list of security roles called as security roles. We've changed that name to security profiles to refer to data fabric security profiles and to avoid any kind of confusion that you're actually exporting and importing IFS security roles. That is not done through the data fabric application. That's done through the security application in Infor portal. Let me switch over to the demo. Just to mention as part of this slide, the structure of the JSON that you export has a certain concepts around it. So every security profile will have its own name. It will come with a description that was on the IFS security role at the time of exporting. When you re-import this file, since it doesn't export and import the IFS security role, it will use the information at the moment that's available in the tenant when you're importing this security profile that you exported. It includes also all the access security permissions for the features, as well as the data permissions if there are any set for these profiles. Let me just switch over to my browser. Okay, so when we go to security here, on the left side, I have all the IFS security roles or security profiles in our case that have been included for managing in data fabric security. If I want to include more, I can go through create profile, and here I would choose one of the IFS security roles that hasn't been included in data fabric security so far. Right now, there is only one role there, and for the demo purposes, I've created one that's called Data Fabric Webinar. If I open it, I can see that there are certain settings that I have done here, as well as certain object permissions that I have set. So for this object, I have set object level access, and for this object, I have set property level access. So that means only certain properties, or also known as columns, have been allowed for this security profile. So if I want to export, I can select one or more security profiles. And when I click on this export button, it will export all those that are selected. You can also select all if you want through this option here. Just be careful if there are too many of them. It shouldn't be a problem. Just be sure that you know what you're exporting and migrating over to another environment. So it's best to review in details since it's related to security. So once I press this export, now I have that file locally saved. And if I open it, you will see here that for the profile name that's called Data Fabric Webinar, this has to match IFS security role. And you can see it took the description, but when importing, it will take the description of the IFS security role that's existing on the tenant. And here we have the configuration settings of the permissions. So for example, for data ledger, the user has permissions to access it, but for purge, they don't have any access because it's set to false. If I scroll to the bottom, you will see that for the objects, for data security, we include only the objects on which there is any kind of permissions allowed. Those objects that don't have any permissions are not included. So that means when importing this profile, all those objects that are not included here are not granted any permissions for this IFS security role. So when importing this back, there are certain validations that can happen. So either the security profile is completely new for this environment, or there might be an existing one with the same name based on the IFS security roles that exist on that environment. As well, certain objects might or might not exist on the target environment where you're importing this. So that's another validation you might see when importing the profile. So I'll import the profile that also contains a missing IFS security role. So just to see how that looks like. Firstly, it will ask me, do I want to skip or replace the one that's existing here? So if I choose replace, it will replace the settings of the existing profile with the one that I'm importing. And when I import it, it will perform those validations, and it might throw some warnings at me to tell me that certain conditions need to be reviewed. And one of those conditions is that I'm importing another security profile for which the IFS security role no longer exists. So it tells me the profile was successfully imported. However, the security role does not exist. So you should either contact your admin to add that IFS security role or adjust here the settings, and maybe you want to remove this security profile from Data Fabric Security. And for the other one, it says that it was successfully imported and it overwritten the other one that existed already there. There is another condition here that would happen for the objects, as I said. And in case the security profile is importing objects that are no longer available on that environment, so someone removed them from data catalog, the profile will be successfully imported, but those objects that don't exist on the target environment will not be imported. So to fix that situation, you should primarily ensure that all the object names that you're trying to import for security settings, they exist in data catalog. So yes, part of the troubleshooting, ensure that the data catalog objects exist in the target environment for which you have any kind of data security permissions, as well as the IFS security roles. So make sure that they already exist on the target environment. Otherwise, when the profile is imported, it will complain that there is no security role defined for it. Make sure that you also review the contents of the imported file to ensure that you understand the security permissions that will be granted to that IFS security role. And also, if you're modifying the JSON in some way, ensure that the access controls for the features use the same naming convention as we do in the exported file. So if you change any of that naming, it will not work. So the file will not be valid for importing. So that was for Data Fabric security and the export and import. Hopefully you will have some questions and I can answer them in the chat. The next topic is data ledger and the enhancement we did for reconciling data that arrived through streaming ingestion. Data ledger is not a new feature of Data Fabric. It has existed for a long time now. However, it supported primarily reconciling data that arrived through batch ingestion, and that was also adopted by only the M3 application at this moment. However, before proceeding to discuss more details about the enhancements for data ledger, I would like to give an overview of our data ingestion solution architecture and what options exist for ingestion data. This kind of connects also for the next topic, that is for streaming pipelines and SQL Server. But I think overall, it's good to have this technical knowledge for the people that are dealing with administrating data in Data Fabric. So with that, there are a few ways of Infor Cloud Suites bringing data to Data Lake or to Data Fabric. The newer methods that we currently have are streaming ingestion and batch ingestion. Those are two protocols provided by Data Fabric, which are used primarily for ingesting live data. That's the streaming ingestion that allows our ERPs to send each record change as it happens. We call that as well as a data event. So anytime there is a transaction in the ERP's database, either a record is created or changed or deleted or archived, all those changes can be immediately now published through the streaming ingestion without having to deal with any kind of micro-batching process in the source application. So that allows our ERPs to provide immediate live transaction streaming to Data Fabric. The other method that Data Fabric has is called the batch ingestion. Both of these are APIs that are also available for US customers to integrate with through the API gateway, if you have a use case for that. But in the same format, they're used also by our ERPs, by Infor Cloud Suite applications. The difference between streaming ingestion and batch ingestion is that through batch ingestion, we expect the source application to batch the data before sending it to Data Fabric. So it will be already formatted in an NDJSON file with all the records that have been changed since the last time they sent something through batch ingestion. It can be used also for sending live data. However, in that case, the data will not be immediately published when it changes because we require the source application to batch the data when dealing with batch ingestion. So ideally, it's positioned for sending initial load data, reload of some of the data from the ERP, or for using with Data Lake archiving, which is a feature that allows the ERPs to offload a certain portion of their data from the database and completely reside it in the Data Lake. So with that, what you can expect in the future is that to see more Infor applications adopting the streaming ingestion protocol so that they can provide live real-time data along with stream pipelines, and batch ingestion being adopted for pushing those initial loads because it performs very well when dealing with large volumes of static data that just needs to be moved in a lift and shift fashion. The other method that our ERPs are still using to publish data to Data Fabric is going through Ion. Data Lake originated as part of Ion originally. However, with the forming of the Data Fabric application, we're separating the integration use cases when one should be used over the other. So Ion is primarily an application integration platform where applications are exchanging business object documents, and that remains to be the case. We're not changing anything around that. However, when ERPs adopt streaming and or batch ingestion, they will stop or they will plan decommissioning of publishing of data, replicated data through Ion, and will focus on sending data through streaming ingestion and batch ingestion. This is just for the data integration use cases with Data Fabric. So this is just about the new line delimited JSON data that you are most likely familiar already with. And we're not changing anything in how the applications are integrating with Ion. So what you can expect, you are already maybe familiar because M3 and LN have adopted the streaming ingestion. LN has already announced when they will stop supporting Ion for data replication and will fully rely on streaming ingestion and batch ingestion. M3 has not announced that yet, but those we can expect that as a strategy going forward, that we see more Infor applications taking on the direct ingestion services and planning to decommission the replication through Ion. So what does that mean in terms of streaming ingestion? So because applications are sending the transactions as they happen, so there is no batching on the source, to ensure that the data lake has optimally sized data objects, which helps with overall performance when reading from the data lake. And a lot of our services are reading off the data lake as well as you as a customer might be consuming from the daily itself. Having files that are bigger are generally better for the performance. So previously, you might have been familiar that we had the micro batching process in the streaming ingestion. So anytime we receive a record from the ERP, we group those by the object name and the logicality of the sender, and we store that in Delhi. That batching process was organized around a 10-minute window. So anytime we receive the first record from the ERP, we start a batching window that lasted 10 minutes. And when the 10 minutes, estimated 10 minutes expire, we form a data object in the dialect with those changes that arrived within that 10-minute period. From the April release, we reduced that to 5 minutes, or alternatively as 5 megabyte object size if that size is reached first. So you can expect with streaming ingestion and the dialect to see every 5 minutes a file being formed with all the changes that have been streamed from the source application. What has changed also in April is because of the data ledger enhancement, now the ERPs send with the streaming ingestion messages a source publication date. And that source publication date is the timestamp of when that individual record was sent through the streaming ingestion. We use this to group now the objects as well. So every 15 minutes on the clock on the wall, we form a data objects that belong to these 15 minutes. So now we know exactly in which time period when the data was published from the source, in which that time period the objects belong to. How does that help us is that with data ledger, we had a challenge that streaming data is continuous and there is no boundaries to count the rows that were sent by the source and that we received in daily. So without having any boundaries on continuous flow of data, it was very challenging. How do we accurately reconcile to ensure that we know everything that was sent by the source is everything that we received? So just as a reminder, what Data Ledger already offered is that first of all, it's a troubleshooting tool. It will report alignment or misalignment of data on specific objects from the ERP. The misalignment could be for different reasons. It could be that one of the services had problems either in the sender or in the receiver in data fabric. Data could be delayed for some reason. Someone might have purged data from your side. Generally, these are very exceptional scenarios. These are not scenarios that we see often. Generally, we hope never to see them. But when they happen, we need to have these right tools to be able to properly troubleshoot and triage where the problem is and isolate it into specific periods and for specific objects. And that was something that was missing for Data Ledger with streaming ingestion. It offers two types of checks. So it provides a flow check, which means we count everything that the source tells us it sent with everything that we received. So anytime a flow check is mismatched, we report that as a reconciliation that has failed or it's classified as a mismatch. However, there is another check that is done manually, and that is the state check. And that's where the source application tells us that at a given point of time, this is the amount of records that exist in the sources database tables. And we check that manually with Compass to count the max variations that exist at that given time as well within the flow check is done automatically by the source application and data fabric application. The state check is provided automatically by the source application. However, we are not checking it automatically. A user has to come to the data ledger application and run the query to count the records in Compass. So since previously in streaming, this is how it looked like. M3 was just sending us the state check, and we were not able to reconcile the flow check of how much data was sent. Now that is enhanced, and the source application can tell us exactly how much data was sent in a specific period. And we can check that same period in Delec and compare if we have the exact same count. That is done using the source publication date. So that source publication date, just a second to turn on the laser pointer. So you can see here, this is how the payload looks like when the streaming application is sending something through the streaming ingestion protocol. It tells us for which object name. It sends us a correlation ID for the specific record. It identifies itself for which is the application logical ID, and it provides the source publication date for each record. So it tells us for this record, this is when I have published it to streaming ingestion. Along with that, it's sending us also a checksum for that record. So the checksum allows us not just to count the exact records that exist in the dialog, but we can verify those are the same records the source has sent us, because the checksum is unique for a specific record. If we identify that there is a mismatch in the checksum, even though the count of the records is correct, we'll still identify that as a mismatch in the reconciliation. So how the reconciliation process has changed is that now we have 15-minute time intervals for which a reconciliation happens. Previously, with the batch ingestion, that was every hour. Now, with 15-minute windows, we can isolate a problem specifically to a 15-minute interval if that's necessary, and we can isolate it to a specific object. This helps not just US customers, but also Infor support, because this gives us more precise information when you're reporting any kind of issues. You can just take screenshots and tell us my reconciliation cards are mismatched for this period and for these data objects in daily. This is according to the wall clock, as I said. So from 12 till 12:15, there is one reconciliation period. From 12:15 to 12:30, there is another reconciliation period, and so on. This allows us also to identify any kind of late arriving data. So if the source said that it published something for 12:05, but it arrived at 12:30, we'll find this record later, data object later, and we can bring it into the reconciliation for the card that was for the interval 12:0 till 12:15. Okay, I'll switch over to the UI just to show you how that looks there. Sorry, let me switch over from here to this tab. So this is the data ledger application. It's found under data lake, and you go to data ledger. On my environment here, there is nothing for batch ingestion, because in this case, M3 is just publishing data through streaming ingestion, and it's reconciling the streaming ingestion data. Unfortunately, I cannot show you a live demo how I change a record in M3 and it shows up in the data ledger, because it takes 15 minutes to reconcile. But what you can see here is that for the interval start and interval end, which started at 4:15 and ended at 4:29, obviously there are a few seconds here, 59 seconds as well, the M3 application reconciled for the object mitmas, and it reconciled that the source tells us it sent 3 records or instance counts, and Daylight has 3 records or 3 instance counts already stored there. And the checksum verification was correct. That means that what M3 claimed as a checksum on the records that was sent, we could correlate that exactly with the records in Daylight. For the demo purposes, this is not accurate, the raw count. It reports more than it actually has in the Daylight, but it's good for demonstration purposes just to show you that a user would have to run this query manually to count the records in the Daylight. That runs Compass behind the scenes, and you will see that there are much less records here in the Daylight, and the source has more. So this is now reported as a mismatch. The card changed to a mismatch. If I need to reset this, I can do this by reconcile here. This will reset the card and reset the Compass query count. But this is also used, for example, if this card is a mismatch and there was late arriving data, you can rerun the reconciliation and this will check, okay, maybe I received the data in the meantime and I'll just find it for this specific period if now I have more records or the situation is the same. If I go to Atlas now to see how this looks like on the object itself, you can see that there are multiple timestamps here now that we have on each data object. So this is one file or one data object that we formed using the streaming ingestion protocol. You can see that on the channel here it says stream. That means it arrived through the streaming ingestion. And what it tells me is that in this object, the source publication date, so the first record that was published had this timestamp. So this is when the first record arrived, the first record that the source tells me when it's sent. The event date is when we actually received that first record. So you can see there is a minor difference here. Probably it's just milliseconds when the source sent it and when we started receiving it in Data Fabric. And this is when the object was physically stored and when the object was indexed in the lake. So that means since the source published it and until we indexed it, there was an approximate time in transit of 5 minutes with 2 seconds. If I look at the file inside, it should be correct that we have just three records, I believe. And that's correctly how much the data ledger counted, as well as how much the ERP told us it sent. If there would be multiple data objects for the same source publication period within the 15 minutes, so if this is 420, this means it was the reconciliation period is between 4:15 and 4:30. Okay, let me switch over back. So you will find also information about this data ledger enhancement in Infor education portal. So we have the release training materials for every new feature, including this. What's important to understand is that both the data ingestion services and the data ledger are adoption topics for the Infor applications. Even though Infor is just one for our customers, internally there are certain roadmap for each of the applications. So right now, in April, we released for Data Fabric the enhancement for the streaming ingestion in Data Ledger. M3 are in process of adopting it, and their target release date is for October this year. And other Infor applications like LN, for example, I know there have been many enhancement requests for LN to support Data Ledger. They're targeting that for April 2026, and also other Infor applications will follow. It is a best practice for our Infor applications to adopt one or both of the data ingestion services from Data Fabric, and also adopt Data Ledger as part of that. That is the only way we can provide you trust in our data that everything that was sent is successfully received in Data Fabric. It's a common question we receive by our customers, and it's a common also scenario that sometimes we need to go through a troubleshooting process to identify if everything that was published was successfully also received in Data Fabric. So we will see more and more adoption by Data Ledger going forward by other Infor applications as well. If your application is not yet supporting it, either streaming ingestion or Data Ledger, please contact your Infor representative or as well as the product management team for that Infor application to get informed if they have it on the roadmap, or to submit an enhancement request for those applications to start supporting these features. Hopefully we'll have some questions for Data Ledger, and I'll be able to answer them through the chat as well. Right, and for the last topic is three pipelines with SQL Server destinations. This is an enhancement that we released in April. It was under an early adoption before that by a few Infor customers as well. It's important to understand that stream pipelines is an additional service. So that means it's not included with your Infor OS tier licenses, and you need to acquire it additionally. What's the goal with the streaming architecture in Data Fabric is that we want to provide the shortest path for the data replication process from the source to a certain target system. And that target system can be your own database, in the future other types of destinations as well, but it can be also an Infor target system. For example, as part of our roadmap, we have a data warehouse as a service. We will be able to stream data also to the data warehouse, but also we are exploring if there would be need for other applications to receive this data as well. But what's important to understand is that the streaming solution architecture is made of two components. There's the streaming ingestion API, and stream pipelines. So only when the ERP is publishing data with streaming ingestion, we can provide the shortest path for the data to traverse through stream pipelines to the target tables. What's important to know, even though this is not a new feature, I think it's good to reiterate that for the audience, is that nothing has changed in the data fabric concepts in terms of the data. So if you were consuming data previously that wasn't published through streaming ingestion, this data will continue to look the same. The only difference is how the source is publishing this data. Previously, the source was batching it. Now with streaming ingestion, they can just send off any transaction as it happens, and we take care of the micro-batching in data fabric, but that also provides us the data in data fabric in its most atomic format, just a single record, and we can immediately process this record downstream in pipelines. So how does that solution architecture look like? Hopefully this diagram is big enough to see it, but the top portion here explains that whenever we get in data fabric something published through streaming ingestion, that those are individual transactions, so the individual records come in a high throughput, a high frequency fashion, we can immediately push them out through stream pipelines. Stream pipelines are the user-facing tool. So you're managing stream pipelines, you're defining for which objects you would like to stream them. It doesn't have to be every object in data fabric or that the ERP is replicating. It should be those for which you have real-time needs. Those objects that don't have real-time needs, you can use the other ways of extracting data by pulling it or using something else like the ETL tool. Generally, what we see is customers either combine different solution architectures to achieve immediate insights or scheduled insights, or they use purely stream pipelines for all the tables that they need. That's also something we've seen with customers. However, the idea is that this solution architecture, when using streaming ingestion pipelines, can provide the shortest path for replicating data from one end to another end. What happens in parallel is that the streaming ingestion will ensure that everything is also stored in Delhi. So that's how we actually achieve immediate transfer rate pipelines. Pipelines will not wait for data to arrive in Delhi before it can process it further. Anything that will arrive for those tables that you've created pipelines for, it will immediately get pushed out to one of the supported destinations. At the same time, streaming ingestion will create all those files optimally sized in Delhi. And if you want, you can continue consuming that data by querying it with Compass, retrieving it transformed with Compass, or retrieving the objects with the object retrieval API. You can use the ION to retrieve that data. You can use also the ETL client. So the concepts have remained within the Delhi the same. Usually what we get asked about the streaming solution architecture is, can pipelines work with data that is not produced through streaming ingestion? The answer is yes, that is possible. However, you have to manage your expectations here of what you're actually expecting from stream pipelines, and you should also work with our consultants to understand also how the data is published by the source if they're not streaming it. Sometimes the source might be micro-batching data very quickly, something like 1 minute to 10 minutes, but some of the applications might have longer replication cycles. So what you can expect is that even though stream pipelines can support and push data out that comes through either batch ingestion or through ION, what will happen is that first it will land in the data lake, then it will go through a pipeline. You have to expect that this will never be as immediate as when using streaming ingestion, because the source needs to micro-batch it, it has to arrive into the data lake first, and then it will go through the pipeline. Both of these processes, either through streaming ingestion or coming data through batch ingestion, are continuous processes that happen within pipelines. There are no schedules. There is no checking of new data by the pipeline. Everything as it happens is pushed through the pipelines if there is a subscription for that object name. I'll show a demo of this, but just to discuss about the requirements for SQL Server. So pipelines have been supporting until April target destinations that are based on PostgreSQL, so Aurora PostgreSQL and Azure Database PostgreSQL. We supported also Snowflake. Now from April, we are supporting SQL Server cloud databases that are based on Amazon RDS for SQL Server, or Azure SQL database or Azure SQL managed instance. Those are the technologies we test with and officially support. If you have other SQL Server services that you would like us to support, please submit us an enhancement request. We'll start including them in our test processes and ensure that they are certified for pipelines. When setting up a SQL Server, so we as Infor, we don't provide you the instructions how to do this within the cloud platform. There are many instructions how to do this that are provided by the cloud platform itself. But the requirements that we impose are that we should be able to reach this SQL Server instance through the internet and with a JDBC connection. That's what we use behind the scenes to establish that connection. You should create a database user that's primarily for stream pipelines. Don't combine different users, for example, a human user and a service user. So create a service user that's for stream pipelines and ensure that that user can access the database schemas and the tables that it needs to read and write to. So we need pipelines since it allows you to list the tables and pick to which one you will like to load data. You should give this user permissions to read, write, and also list the tables. The authentication is password-based. And as an additional security measure, we're providing you with outbound IP addresses from Infor that you can whitelist in your firewall so that only connections coming from these IP addresses are permitted for this user that you will create. So it's just 3 IP addresses based on the region your environment is. So if you're in the US East region, you will find that in that KB article here. Also for the other regions, there is a list here. You need to just whitelist those in your firewall, and then pipelines will be able to connect it. Once you've set this up, then you create a pipeline destination, fill in the credentials and the host for the database, and you can press the test button there. If everything is successful, then you can start creating your pipelines. Right, let me switch over to the demo. Sorry for this ending flight here. So let's switch over to pipelines. For anyone that's not familiar with pipelines, when you license this feature, you will find 3 components here. So stream pipelines is where you manage your pipelines to the tables of the destination. Destinations is where you create your connections to your databases. And the replay queue is where you handle any kind of failure to deliver records to the tables. For each pipeline, you can find all the records that fail to deliver for different reasons. So when we go to destinations, this will be our focus of the presentation. How do you create a SQL Server destination and how do you use it in pipelines? When creating a new one, I should pick either Amazon RDS SQL Server or Azure SQL database, depending on where it's hosted. You pick one of these 2. And when I pick this one, I need to provide standard details like which is the database host name, the port of through which we should connect, the database name itself, the username that we will be connecting through, and the password. Once these are filled in, you can press this test button and it will report if everything is okay. I already have a destination that's created for me, and I can see it's used in 2 running pipelines and it's used in 2 idle pipelines that are not actively transferring anything. When I go to stream pipelines, this is where I manage the individual pipelines for each table or each object I want to stream. So if I want to stream something, I have to give the pipeline a name. And I have to choose one of the destinations that are already created in the destination component. So I'll pick a SQL Server here. And the next thing I do is I select an object that is the new line delimited objects that exist in data catalog. So for example, if I want to stream from M3, I would look up, let's see, Mitnas, like the item master. If I want to stream something from LN, it would be something like TCB ID. So all your ERP data is organized by the object's name as they are registered in data catalog. So for each pipeline, you have to pick which object you're subscribing to, and then select to which table you want to stream this to. So a common question we're asked is, can pipelines create the tables in the target destination? Currently, that's not possible. We require you to create the tables before setting up the pipelines. So in my case here, I should already have one table that's created for Mitmas. And the table columns and the data types have to match exactly the column names or the property names as they're in data catalog. Currently, this is a strict validation that the column names must be exactly the same name, and also the letter casing has to be the same. This is something we're enhancing in the October release. Again, that's with the roadmap disclaimer there, that we will support custom mapping. So you can name these columns as you wish in your table, and then we will be able to map to those as well, or you can pick to which columns you map this object property. However, right now you have to give those names exactly the same name as they're in the data catalog. You can choose two ways of loading the data. So you can either insert every record that will come through the ingestion and into the pipeline, or use upsert. So when using upsert, we use the SQL Server merge statements, and we check the target table for existing records of those that we're trying to load. If we find the same exact record when we're trying to load the data, we check the variation number. So we ensure that only higher variation numbers are loaded in the target table, so we don't accidentally overwrite anything newer with something older. So that's done again, as I mentioned, based on the data fabric concepts. If you're familiar, we heavily rely on the data catalog metadata, that there should be a variation number, timestamp, delete indicator, and so on, so that we know how to handle the records through pipelines and load them into the database. At the moment, we don't support deleting data in the target system. That's the case for SQL Server, Postgres, as well as Snowflake. It shouldn't matter. And what you can expect is that every record is loaded and upserted only with the highest variation, but you will contain the deleted records in the target system, including the archive records. So those are records that you should handle within your target system by yourself, either by having some scheduled process that cleans up this data. We don't recommend doing that on a trigger. It should be something that you do on schedule, or create some views or other ways of handling deleted records in your target table. So this is set up. I can now run this pipeline. I already have one that is running for this same object. That's this one. So it is set up to read for any incoming data for Mitmas. So that means no matter from which ingestion service I will receive data for Mitmas, it will be immediately pushed through this pipeline, no matter if it's streaming ingestion, batch ingestion, or ION. The difference is that with streaming ingestion, this will get the data quicker through the pipeline. And the target table is, again, a Mitmas table with the same column names, and I use the upsert logic. This pipeline is running. If I want to stop it, I press this, and I should confirm that. I cannot do any changes to the pipeline while it's running. I have to stop the pipeline and then do some changes if I want those changes to be in the pipeline. So for example, if M3 or another ERP does a schema change while we have a pipeline running, that change will not happen automatically within the pipeline. So any new columns are not immediately processed through the pipeline. You would have to stop the pipeline, include those columns in your target table, as well as refresh this pipeline to include that new mapping, and then start it, including that change. Since I was mentioning that you have to create your own tables in the target system, what we recommend is to follow the documentation that we have for data type mapping between the data catalog object data types and the SQL Server data types. The same is for Postgres and Snowflake. There are different data types each system has. But based on the information you will find in the data catalog schema, so for example, which is the date time, which is the numbers, and what are the constraints, that's how you will define the same data types in SQL Server. Just as a reminder, all the data catalog information is available through the data catalog application, so you can export those schemas, or you can use the data catalog APIs in API Gateway to retrieve the metadata about each object. So for the object Mitmas, you can find out for every column which is the maximum value for the integer, what is the precision and scale for the decimals, For example, what's the max value for a string? All that information is provided by the ERPs within data catalog, and you should use that information to create those tables, either by creating a script or some process that reads those schemas and interprets them to a SQL Server DDL create statement. The data catalog object schemas are according to JSON schema standard draft 06. So you can use that standard as a guideline on how to process and read the metadata from data catalog. Alternatively, you can also create a support case for Data Fabric, and we'll try to help you kickstart this process for you, so we can provide you examples of DDL statements based on the list of tables you will provide us. And we cannot officially support those as schemas changes, but it should give you a head start to at least create those tables and then adjust and change those as schemas evolve. It's in our roadmap in the future to support table creation, but it's not something in the short term, at least for now. Okay, so I have this pipeline running. If I go to the overview here, I can see if there are any problems in the replay queue. This one doesn't seem to have any problems. Also, it doesn't show any live data in the last 15 minutes. If I check the last 24 hours, there will be some records I've tested with before today. You can see I have transferred 3 records, or I published 3 records from M3. 3 records successfully were delivered, as well 1 later and 1 later delivered. Excluded is an optimization process that we have in pipelines. Maybe it's good I switch over to the diagram I was showing before. So just to understand how the load process works here is that we have a very tiny micro batching process at the end of before offloading the data to the database. We don't do individual insert or update transactions on every record, but we batch them in 1,000 records or 100 milliseconds. So we want to ensure that we are as quick as possible in the end-to-end transfer of data. So in that micro batching process of loading data, so since we do bulk inserts, we identify if we have the same record multiple times for some reason, because some tables are highly frequently changing. And we will see if that same record has multiple variations in that batch, and we will exclude those that are older variations and ensure we keep just the latest variations to load. All of these processes are described in our user guide. So if you go to, this is our Data Fabric user guide, you can find it through docsinfor.com. We have this section under streaming data to Data Fabric, from Data Fabric, where we have stream pipeline concepts. So here you will read more about how the processing of data goes through stream pipelines, how we process the batch data, how we load data into the target system, and how the upsert load method as well works. These are all the same for any of the systems that we support. There is no difference between SQL Server and Postgres. The difference is in the load statements that we use, because it's a different technology. Right. So this is my SQL Server database. I use dbeaver for my demo purposes. I already have 1 record that I was changing today. So if we want to change that same record, I'll go to the M3 application. I'll leave this pipeline running, and I'll switch over to M3 item master. So I'm editing this item master from the form here. I'm not going inside each item, but I can change this to item for webinar. And if I press enter now, I should immediately see this change in my database. And you can see here it changed from item for webinar. If I change that record again, number 2, let's put it like this, and I and I switch over to the database and I query it, I can see that change is immediately there. This works at a large scale of volume, so we know that ERPs can produce high transactions depending on the table. Some of them are more busy than the others. So we can support high volume and high frequency of changes through stream ingestion and stream pipelines. So if I go back to the pipeline now, and I switch over to the last 15 minutes, these are automatically refreshing, but they're with 15-second delay. So you can expect that every 50 seconds this refresh. And you can see that we've already processed 2 records. It means processed, they went through the pipeline, and we successfully delivered two. It's important to understand that delivered doesn't mean how many records exist in the target system. This means how many records we've successfully delivered, and those are updates to existing records as well. So the delivered should match the processed, but what you will see in the database is just the high variations, just the operational view of the data as it is in the source system. If you encounter any errors, so the pipeline cannot deliver a record for some reason, usually it could be some data type mismatch, some constraint on the column, they will show here as an error, and you will find them in the replay queue. If there are any that have been replayed by a user, you will find them here as indicated that some records were successfully replayed. It's similar to what process represents. It means some user replayed from the replay queue and it went through the pipeline, and it could have been successfully delivered or not. If it's not delivered successfully, it will become an error again. And you also show it here in this chart as part of the replay queue. I'm not sure if I have any records here to show. It seems that my replay queue is empty in this case. But if there were any errors for the pipelines, those would be individual pipelines you see here, and for the category of the pipeline of the error as well. So depending on what's the issue, it could be a data validation, it could be data type mismatch, it could be that the table is no longer existing or the database is down. All of those are going to be shown here. Thank you, Rina.
Thank you, Bojan. We're almost at the hour, but before we go, Bojan, when we talked about this webinar, there were a couple of other topics you mentioned we could do sometime in the future. Streaming pipelines in detail and data extraction options, I think, were the ones.
Since I think I'm sharing, I'll show these slides and I'll explain what I mean. Stream pipelines is not the only tool for accessing data. We have also APIs that allow you to retrieve the raw data objects from the data lake. There is the Compass query platform that allows you to implement ETL type of processes where you transform the data on extraction. And also we have the ETL tool that we are further enhancing that allows you to have this tool that can easily integrate with our APIs to extract the data in a scheduled way. So depending on your use cases, there are many ways of accessing the data, which we can deep dive into one of the next webinar sessions. So we can answer any common questions that we usually hear from customers. But I think the majority of the customers are not familiar with the answer. So happy to provide as well.
All right. So audience, if you think a session on data extraction options would be good, you can put your comment in the Q&A. Obviously, the recording will be available afterwards of this session. So from the link where you used, or the one that you used to register, that's where you'll have a recording, and it will also be on YouTube probably in a day or two. But with that, again, thank you, Bojan, for the interesting session, and thank you for the audience. And I'm hoping I'll see many of you in our EPN session in July. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.